Our secrets lie in the border fires and the humming wires. Amen, you know you're never coming back.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and for those of you who are able to watch the show live and not just listening via podcast, you'll notice where it's a little different today. Instead of our normal co-hosts, we've got two special guests in the studio today, and Verkamp and Tracie Harris. And they both got a little bit of something to talk about, and we'll be taking your calls shortly. It's February 19th, 2006, if you're watching us live, and this is a live call-in show. We'll have the number up soon. We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at 11:30 at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, except for the third Sunday of the month, which this one was the third Sunday, and we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Today's lecture was Alan, is it Clark? I think. Klein, Alan Klein, thanks. And it was a great look at science and how the community perceives science and what needs to change regarding that, which comes up a lot with regard to intelligent design and evolution debates, and also just in general politics and how science is treated and regarded. It was a great lecture, and we're very thankful that he had the opportunity and was willing to come down and speak to us today. In addition to the Atheist Experience program, we also host a bi-weekly internet audio program called The Nonprofits. You can get more information about that show at our website or at nonprofitsradio.com. It's hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Loubet, and also features Russell Glasser and myself. And this coming Saturday will be the next live program. Feel free to join us. Connection information is available via freethoughtradio.com or at our website. In addition to the programs that we sponsor, we have a number of social events throughout the week. On Mondays, we have Godless Gamers at the home of Russell Glasser. And Tuesdays is Unholy Rollers at Playland Skating Rink near 183 in Burnett on McCann Road behind the Nissan dealer. And Thursdays is Atheist Happy Hour at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder road of I-35, just a little south of 183. More information on all of those, as well as other activities, are available at our website, www.atheist-community.org. If you're coming, in addition to those events, we have dinner. The cast and crew goes out for dinner every Sunday after the program, and we invite guests to come down and meet us, meet both the people who are on the show, those behind the scenes, and some other ACA members. We're currently going to Threadgills, which is located on Riverside Drive. And the show runs till 6 o'clock. We normally get there somewhere between 6:30 and 6:45. If you're planning to come down to the show to preach or proselytize, don't bother. We'll have the telephone number up for you soon, and you're free to call in and talk to us about any number of things. We're going to have a couple different topics, and as always, we're open to discussion and calls on any number of things. So we'll get the number up for you soon. That does it for regular announcements. And we've got Ann. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You recently had a little trouble and wanted to talk to us about it.
I did. I recently had my appendix removed, and basically it was just your average appendicitis attack. I had a lot of abdominal pain, and I went to the emergency room, and they immediately admitted me and took out my appendix at about 6 a.m. the next morning. They did it in quite a hurry. So I wanted to see what exactly it was that they had taken out of me. I kind of knew just a little bit, probably what the average person knows about it. But I knew it also would be kind of controversial between creationists and evolutionists. But what I found out was that most creationists and evolutionists agree with the description of the appendix, which there's several little bullets here, that the appendix is near the beginning of the large intestine. It's longest in childhood, and it shrinks over time as you get older. It's composed of all layers of the intestine, but also has a lot of lymph tissue in it. And it's not unique to humans. It's proportional to the amount of plant matter that an organism eats. And basically what it is a place where the plant matter will go to be to sit and ferment for a while before it gets into the lower intestine to be absorbed. Across the board, the evolutionists that I looked at state generally that a vestige, the definition of a vestige, and I quote from Talk Origins, Douglas Theobald had a quote that is, "Any diminished structure that previously had a greater physiological significance in an ancestor than at present." When I looked at an article by Wayne Jackson of the ChristianCourier.com, which is published by the Church of Christ, which obviously is a very influential website, stated that, quote, "According to the advocates of evolution, many of Earth's creatures have within their bodies certain structures which are entirely useless." When I looked at all the evolutionist sites that I could look up, I saw that nobody ever stated, no evolutionists ever stated that it absolutely does nothing. As a matter of fact, they gave even examples of what they thought it might do. So basically, we're not even arguing about the same thing. Another theme that seemed prominent was this argument. It's again a quote from Wayne Jackson at the Christian Courier. Quote, "The appendix presents a problem for evolutionists. If it is a vestige of some former evolutionary state, it ought to be more clearly defined as we proceed backwards, examining our family tree. Curiously, though, our supposedly near relatives, the monkeys, do not even have an appendix, while our more distant kinsmen, the rabbit and the possum, do possess this organ. This is not a reasonable circumstance in the evolutionary scheme of things." Well, firstly, some monkeys do have some form of appendixes. And secondly, evolutionists hold that the appendix evolved independently in different animals. And again, this quote is from Talk Origins. "Extensive comparative analysis has shown that the appendixes of humans and these other mammals were derived from the cecum independently. These structures are not homologous as appendixes. The relationship between these and other structures and the hominoid appendix is similar to the homology of bat and bird wings. The wings of bat and birds are homologous as modified forelimbs, yet they are not homologous as wings. Likewise, the appendixes of rabbits and humans are homologous as modified ceca, yet they are not homologous as appendixes. If the rabbit and the human appendix has similar functions, which has never been experimentally demonstrated, they are the result of independent convergence of function and form." In an article on a website called AnswersInGenesis.org, a man named Ken Ham and Carl Wieland say, in response to why the appendix is so susceptible to disease, was that, quote, "Death, disease, and degeneration from original perfection are all a part of the curse on a once perfect creation. They do not reflect on the suitability of the original design." And the problem, of course, with that argument is anything having to do with original sin is that they can just as well be, that could just be used to explain anything that doesn't make sense. The creationist response from Douglas Theobald at Talk Origins, quote, if the appendix does have an important function that we have yet to find, it is a leading candidate for the worst design organ in the human body." And he goes on to say, "Any structure that supposedly ensures our livelihood by its function, yet paradoxically and unnecessarily kills a large fraction of its bearers prematurely, it's poorly designed indeed."
Thanks a lot for that. There's a lot more we can talk about on that. We'll go ahead and get the number up for you for those of you who are wanting to call in. One of the things that kind of caught my eye or ear while you were reading through that is this analogy to looking back in our family tree, which is an incredibly poor analogy because evolutionary theory doesn't have this family tree concept of stepping up a ladder on evolution on the evolutionary ladder, stepping up a new rung. It is tree-like, but it's not that you can trace it back and say that you're more advanced than something else. It's just there's a point of divergence. And while some mammals, in fact, do have appendixes, the fact remains that if it has a use in humans, it's more likely to kill you than help you for the most part, which, as Annie pointed out, that vestigial organs don't have to have no use or even be difficult for us to determine what the use is. It's just diminished use, or their use is not worth the risk of having such an organ, I guess. There are actually people, about 1 in 100,000 or so, who are born without an appendix. It's the use of the appendix has been, discussed by scientists, and nobody knows for sure. There's claims of it being used in the lymphatic system, and also that it might help in fetal development. But the fact is that there are people who are born without an appendix. And that speaks more to evolution than to any kind of intelligent design. And if you're going to claim that the appendix is there as, it used to be perfect, and it's sin that entered the world, and sin created disease, and that just kind of pushes the issue off somewhere else. It's one non-answer after another. But with regard to vestigial organs and features and things that either don't have a good use or don't have any noticeable advantage to the creature, you've got in humans as well the tailbone, which is in the exact same location as the tailbone of animals with tails. It does have some function in the sense that there are muscles attached to it, so it's a muscle attachment point. But it makes no sense that this bone would be there, and it's not. It would make sense for a bone to be there to attach muscle points to, but our tailbone is actually anywhere from 3 to 5, usually 4 vertebrae that are fused together. If this was something that was designed, why design those extra vertebrae, fuse them together when a single bone would do the trick? And why make it look so much like the tailbones found in animals with tails? And occasionally there are humans born with vestigial tails. Usually, mostly they're called atavisms. It's kind of a reemergence of a particular formerly useless or vestigial organ. The only time that those tails have been discounted by creationists or whatever is when they're pseudo-tails. The actual tails, there's been more than 100 cases, less than a third of them were pseudo-tails. And pseudo-tails are basically just lesions in the caudal region, but true tails are a complex arrangement of connective tissue, muscles. They have blood vessels, nerve vessels, hair, skin, sweat glands, sebaceous glands. So there's actual evidence of people being born with these vestigial tails. There's other things that you can look at too. The little pink thing in the corner of your eye is a nictitating muscle, which is, you've seen probably on Discovery Channel or something, those animals who have a third horizontal eyelid, I think beavers are one of them, but crocodiles and lizards and different birds and other things, they have those. A lot of times it's used when they go underwater as an extra protective layer that you can see through. We've got one. It's just folded up permanently in the corner of our eye, serves absolutely no function at all. It's just sitting there. What kind of intelligent design sticks that in there? If there is a God or some being who designed us intelligently, why go to so much effort to make it look like we all evolved according to specific rules? Because all of these things attest to the theory of evolution. Wisdom teeth are another example. Most likely it's due to changes in our diet and better dental care, whereas these things would have once been completely functional, because people would lose teeth or ate different foods, whatever. Our heads have shrunk, the jawbones have shrunk to make the wisdom teeth not fill in, and we take better care of our teeth, hopefully. And then when they start to come in, we remove them. Sometimes we remove them before they come in, and they used to do the same thing for the appendix and tonsils and other things. Goosebumps.
Blind fish with eyes.
Yeah, it goes outside of humans. You've got blind fish who have eyes. You have whale pelvises, snake pelvises. Both of them have legs under the skin. And plants, dandelions, they reproduce without fertilization. It's a process called apomixis, I think. But anyway, they still have the flowers and they still produce pollen, even though there's no need for them to use that in their fertilization. So that's good stuff. And if you've got questions or information, I see we're starting to get some calls. We'll start taking calls in a minute. Did you have some news items or stuff you wanted to go over real quick?
Yeah, I mean, if you want. It was just some things that I was up in Dallas weekend before this weekend, and just saw some things in the newspaper that made me think about the range of religion in people's lives, like from non-effective to somewhat effective to extremely effective. And that's affective with an A. One was an older gentleman that published an article that was an essay about the loss of his wife. And one of the things that I found interesting in that article was a statement that he made about his wife. And he said that, I wish Irene were looking down from somewhere, seeing how all my I love yous have turned into I miss yous. How nice it would be to think that someday we will be reunited together forever. However, one cannot will oneself to believe something just because it is reassuring to do so. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I think a lot of times people that are religious don't really understand that it's not really a simple choice to believe something. I mean, it would be like trying to believe in the Easter Bunny. You just can't, just saying it doesn't make it so. Another one was a recent article about a woman at the airport who was found with a head in her bag.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, and apparently she's being charged with, what did it say, I think it was carrying hazardous materials. And she's from Haiti, and it's her belief that this wards off evil spirits, and someone sold her a head. So that obviously is like a very large effect that religion has had on somebody's life, not just her, but whoever lost the head, obviously. And the other one was a little more in the middle of the road. You got, on the one hand, somebody that doesn't believe at all, that's coping with the loss of his wife. On the other hand, you have a woman that's obviously, from most American standards, would be really way out there with her voodoo belief, where she's willing to carry a head around in a bag at the airport. But the article that I think most touched me reminded me of a response I hear from a lot of Christians. A lot of times they'll say, what does it hurt? What does it hurt if I believe this? Like, what have I lost? It's like, if I'm right, what have I lost? Well, this article was about a serviceman and his wife living in Ethiopia, and they were really touched by the amount of poverty that they saw, especially in the orphanages. And they had tried for a few years to to have children, and then they decided to adopt. And when they were in Ethiopia, they thought, this might be a good time, but what held them back was that the wife wanted a sign from God that this was the right thing to do. Otherwise, she wasn't going to do it. So there's hospitals full of, dying, malnourished babies that need love and families, but she's not going to touch one until God tells her this is what she needs to do. And so she prays and she thinks about it, and one day they come and get her and they bring her to the orphanage, and there's a baby there, and his name was Ethiopian, but it translates to miracle. And so that was her sign from God that, I have to take this baby now. So she took this baby, and they're trying to adopt, and the article was about some problems they were having in getting the baby okayed to come to the United States. But I think what got me was she has lost her ability to live her own life. And I don't believe that Christians understand this. I think they see this as a positive thing. They say, well, you're not living your own life, you're living, God's will. And that's a good thing, because God knows what's better for you than you know for yourself. And that's kind of the logic behind it. But the problem comes in when you have to ask yourself, what if what you believe is wrong? Which is what the question is initially, what have I lost if this isn't true? Well, if this isn't true, you've lost your entire life, because you only get one shot at it, and you've given it up to some cult that's telling you what to do, and that's how you lived your whole life, and you went through your entire life never thinking for yourself, never asking yourself what you wanted, never asking yourself what was right, because someone spoon-fed you something that they said was right and they weren't correct. So if you're wrong, you've lost everything. And that's kind of my point with that article.
Yeah, they go through a lot of that's about Pascal's wager. If I'm right and there is a God, then when we die, I'm going to go live forever, and you're going to burn forever in hell. And if I'm wrong, then we've both lost nothing. The concept that you've lost nothing is absurd, and there are other problems with that Pascal's wager as well. Not only have you not necessarily lost anything, but you may have done harm and wasted the life that you have. And there's also the concept that Pascal's wager applies equally to any religion. I mean, just because you can make the argument that says, if I'm right, I'm going to heaven, and if I'm wrong, then nothing's going to happen. That's actually wrong. What if it's some other God? What if one of those other religions got it right? And maybe you're going to wake up and find out that Hindus got it right, and all of a sudden you're in a world of hurt, actually just reincarnated. But no great loss. The concept that you can spend your life, there's not necessarily something inherently wrong with following a religion. I can obviously find things that are wrong in almost any religion, specific tenets that are objectionable or perhaps immoral. You've got in the Christian Old Testament, the Jewish Tanakh, Leviticus 20:13 says to kill male homosexuals. I think that's a completely immoral order, and I don't think there's any way to rationalize that, but people do manage to rationalize that away. Oh, that's the Old Testament, or oh, we don't have to do that anymore, or that was a different time. But if you spend your life allowing those types of ideas, these barbaric concepts about morality and life and human interaction to govern things, you may be sacrificing more than you expect, because how your brain learns and makes connections and determines and how it goes about evaluating situations is very much rooted in what your core beliefs are, what your evidentiary standards are. If somebody makes a claim, Sagan's got the dragon in the garage thing to demonstrate an absurd claim. If you don't have good evidentiary standards for determining what claims are true and what claims are false, then you're basically living your life at risk. And at risk for wasting it as well if it turns out that it's the only one you've got. But let's go on and start taking a couple calls. We've got Grant. How you doing?
Hi, just fine. I've been watching your show for a few weeks now, and I've been noticing your opinions. I agree with almost all of them. In fact, pretty much all of them. Most Christians that I've met and tend to take the tenets of the New and Old Testament with a grain of salt. They pretty much do what they want to do,
right,
and then they come back and repent, like, say, at church, or they may repent in their mind or not, But I tend to go any religion with the historical facts of the situation, as far as the birth and death of Jesus and Mohammed, all of that. I try to find as much historical, actual fact that is known about the situation to evaluate any religion and any tenet that they might put forth. But what I was really going to talk about was that people talk about creation, and you were talking about God's will, and the human mind only has one fashion to work in, and that is reasoning. It reasons. Say, if I drop a piece of fruit and it bruises, well, I can say, and I look at it in the refrigerator the next day, I say, well, why is this orange bruised? Well, because I dropped it. This happened because such and such happened.
Right.
It's a reasoning progression. And other than that, the other side of that is chaos. Things happen by chance, and there's no reason behind anything. It's pretty much chance as far as evolution occurring, from a molecular soup into DNA, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, there's some kind of cause, some kind of reason. We just may not be necessarily able to identify it.
Exactly.
Right.
But it's chance. In other words, evolution depends a lot on chance. Occurrence of changes in DNA. Now, what I'm going to say is...
I'm going to stop you there for just a second, because I agree with, I think, the spirit of what you're saying, but there's an important point to to note, because a lot of people have this concept, especially among intelligent design and creationists, that evolution is just primarily blind chance. And the reality is that the driving force behind evolution is natural selection, which is the exact opposite.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. You can see that by the finches on Galapagos. They did like a 6-month experiment, and their beaks were already changed just from the.
Yeah, occasionly some of those chance arguments are followed.
Real quick evolution. Now, what I want to say is, perhaps there's a third answer, neither chaos nor reason, but something else.
Like?
That's what we don't know.
Well,
I'm saying that we're only capable of seeing things either as happening for a reason or happening by chance, or both combined. Maybe there's a third possibility.
He needs to define that.
yeah,
You need to define that. Like, give us more information on what the third possibility would be.
That's what I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, neither do I. I mean,
my human mind is not capable. My human mind is only capable of functioning in a progressive reasoning.
Okay, Grant, can I just...
From experience and memory, etc. And I go forth from what I've learned, and I know this happened because I learned before that this happened because this happened, etc. And that's learning and reasoning.
Sure.
And it's only capable of that form of function.
well, hang on just a second.
Yeah, Grant, I just have a question for you. If there was this third possibility that wasn't reason and it wasn't chance, and I don't know what it is and you don't know what it is because our minds are incapable of conceiving of this thing, my question would be, how could we discuss it at all?
I just wanted to put forth the possibility.
But the possibility that you're suggesting is something that we would have no knowledge of, and therefore it would be like a non-item.
It's just something I consider, and I've been considering for quite a while.
And there's a lot of this in
there may be a third possibility here besides reason or chaos. And I don't know the answer. It's something I wanted to put forth.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
There's a lot of that in certain philosophical meditations and Eastern religions of, whether they delve towards pantheism or some kind of completely transcendental or transcendent concept of God. God is nature or love, or God is everything, etc. And while that's it's interesting to think about those. It's also interesting to think about the idea that our universe could be a single atom in the thumb of some giant in another universe. I mean, but without any way of finding out.
Well, you brought up Sagan before, and Sagan makes another point that, if you have something that is veridically worthless, it's the same as nothing. So if we're talking about something for which we have zero evidence and zero knowledge and zero attribute, then really it's no different than talking about nothing.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what we end up boiling down to every time. Not that, sure, you can sit around and think about things like that, but and I'm not saying it's a complete waste of time, because thinking about things that you may have no possibility of grasping or ever understanding, or that you may never be able to distinguish from nothing, could lead you to some other thought that's important. But I think when we're talking about trying to identify universal truths, the current thinking, using science and expecting a natural explanation for everything, continues to demonstrate just exactly how reliable that is. And any claims of supernatural have no foundation, no evidence to support them. It's just, a claim. And when I end up debating quite often with believers of different religions, particularly Christianity, if you believe, for example, you're a Christian, and you believe in God, you believe He created the world in 6 days, about 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, and Jesus came down and saved you, etc., and you believe all this on faith without any actual evidence to support it, and you don't care about evidence. This is just something you believe. It's something you've personally experienced, and nobody else could understand it but you. That's fine. You're entitled to belief regardless of what your evidentiary position is. My point would be that if you're willing to hold beliefs without evidence to support them, that's your prerogative. I just don't think it's a very good idea. I don't, if you're operating outside of reason and evidence, it seems to me that you've kind of given up and you've adopted a wishful thinking, I'm going to believe this because it's comfortable for me attitude. We can go on. We got more callers. Julie, anything you want to add on that?
Just that there is the only third possibility that I'm really aware of is there are some people who function primarily on emotion. And I would just want to bring up that as there's a lot of people that feel that their emotional response outweighs reason, and they do function on that level. And sometimes they function successfully. A lot of times there are business moguls who make great financial choices based on their intuitions that might not be clearly reasonably based.
Yeah.
So you can function on emotion. I just don't know that overall, if you choose emotion consistently over reason, if that's really the way to go. I think in most of our day-to-day lives, we are successful at surviving because we utilize reason more than just whim.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, you get these occasional people that make what seem to be intuitive, creative leaps towards something.
And sometimes they work.
And sometimes they work, and a lot of times they don't. We tend to remember the hits and forget the misses, and people say, well, who was it, sewing machine, Hal, who claims to have received the inspiration in a dream being cooked in a pot with a bunch of natives around him with spears, and the spears all had holes in them, and that's how he figured out that the hole for the needle needed to be down at the end. And wow, that's a great intuitive leap. But I tend to look at it as, okay, you got yourself out of the stress of thinking this situation over and over again, and your subconscious mind just worked it out, or you really already knew the answer and adapted your understanding, your thoughts and everything else to fit to it.
Sure.
But just because humans are complex in our thoughts and the way the brain works, and just because somebody can make an intuitive leap on occasion doesn't mean that it justifies running around living your life based on intuition.
Yeah, and I do think that those emotional responses are based on reason at some point. I mean, there's a reason for them if you get down into the person deeper and deeper.
Right.
And sometimes a person doesn't even know why they're emoting the way they are and reacting the way they are. But there's generally a reason why we like things, why we don't like things, why we feel something's a good idea or not. It might not be something that we are capable of expressing at the moment what our rationale was, but there is a rationale behind those emotions, even if it's not a healthy one.
Yeah, even if you don't consciously recognize that there could be really good reasons behind it. But all right, let's go on to Lenny.
Hi, what's up, y'all?
How you doing?
Hey.
First I just want to say that I'm not an atheist, you know what I'm saying, but I feel y'all, it's like, if religion and beliefs were ideal, you know what I'm saying, and like, everybody had them, and didn't infringe on anybody else's or anything like that, I don't think that y'all would have a show, you know what I'm saying?
You may be right. If everybody had their religious beliefs, kept them personal, and didn't try to influence anybody else's beliefs, we may not have a show. I just don't happen to think that that's a likely situation. There's too much contradiction within an individual religion, let alone if you start having conflicts between people of various religious beliefs on political issues and social issues. For instance, gay rights or abortion or death penalty or anything like that. People tend, if they have religious beliefs, to start from that foundation when making their determination about what's right and what's wrong. And as long as you have multiple different religions, you'll still have people making those decisions with that as a basis.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about the intelligent design thing.
Sure.
Like I heard like a radio show guy who's a Christian. He gives an example of, I'm not sure what species of spider it is, but I've heard of it before. It dives in the water and it'll take like a bubble of water with the breeze. And he's saying, well, do you think that it could have evolved on its own? I would counter that with, there's like the orchids, there's some that mimic the female reproductive parts on like a certain wasp that's kind of co-evolved with it. So the male wasp comes along, thinks it's a female, and kind of does his thing, whatever.
Right. And that brings up a really important point about this misperception about atheism, that okay, so an orchid looks a lot like wasp genitals. So it's not, evolution doesn't claim that this was something it developed intentionally. It's just that among all the derivations, this one managed to survive because of the way it looked. So pollinization was furthered by that, and the ones that didn't look like that began to die out. It kind of reminds me, a lot of people ask about atheism, and if without a belief in a God, we get into the morals question almost every week, but there's also this, well, why don't you fall into fatalism or nihilism, you have no meaning for life, let's just get it out. Well, you'd think that they'd realize right off the bat that evolution has already done that work. Those people who take a given situation or set of beliefs, for instance, that there is no God, who would be prone to fatalistic or nihilistic tendencies, they've been weeded out. Natural selection weeds them out. And those who don't fall into the fatalistic or nihilistic trap of my life is worthless and this is the end and there's no God and there's nobody up there who loves me. Those people who can rationally just accept that this is the cold hard facts and we're going to work through our lives and enjoy our family and friends and other things, those are the ones that are more likely to survive.
Yeah, the thing is, it goes both ways, but I guess because for some reason Christians don't like atheists or pagans. I think the pagans is because they kind of ripped off a lot of their stuff. But anyway, it's well, if you don't believe in God, you're gonna not have this and not have that. Well, true enough, I'm sure there's atheists out there who, whether using atheism as an excuse or not, kind of lead like a kind of nihilistic life or whatever. But at the same time, you have people get into religion to do that, and they might even rise, to at the position of power and abuse that,
I think that's fair, Lenny.
So, it's always kind of a one-sided argument, I kind of feel bad for y'all in a way.
We're fine.
Wait, let's go.
Why would you feel bad for us? I'm not making fun of you. I'm just curious why.
Well, not in the sense that because you don't believe in God. It's in the sense that because the way that people could come at y'all, you know what I'm saying?
No, I hear you, Lenny. I think you're making some good points.
It's nothing, personal. It's just you kind of like a cap, it's well, it's because of the atheists that America's losing its morals, or because of this and that, and that's just kind of a baseless argument.
Yeah. Well, we definitely agree on that, and you made some great points. Thank you a lot for calling. We'll talk to you later. Yeah, it's there is a lot of animosity. I think it's built up. Part of it comes from the pulpit, but it doesn't necessarily have to, be in some evil core of preachers trying to say that the atheists are destroying it. There's a real us and them mentality involved with a lot of religions, particularly Christianity. There's gospel concepts of we're not of this world, or we're separate from this world, or we're the chosen ones, and we are not to participate in worldly things, etc. And that sets up that kind of dichotomy. So yeah, we do end up coming under fire for a lot of things. Robertson and Falwell after 9/11. I
think that was a good level-headed call from a believer.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to Chris. How you doing?
Hello?
Hello.
Is it me?
It's you.
Okay. I'm calling. I saw a TV show on Channel 10 last week called Regeneration X, I think, TV.
Regeneration TV, that's a Christian program.
Yeah. Well, they were saying, they were talking about evolution, and they were also talking about politicians, saying, it's better to have a politician that's religious or believes in God because that gives him morals because he has something to answer to. And they said, atheists have nothing to base their morals on, that there's nothing that forces them to be good people. There's only one thing. I got to talk about something else after this, but I thought it was completely absurd. Like they were saying that if the people who made laws were atheists, they would make rape legal.
Yeah.
Because it's a natural, animals rape each other and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's weird to me that religious people, it's almost like they're saying, we're bad people, and we need God to make us good.
Well, they are.
I think even the story in the Bible about Jesus is basically about, he had to die for your sins because you're a piece of crap, basically.
Yes.
And I find it completely preposterous. It's like,
and you're only a piece of crap because I created a piece of crap in the first place, and you're inheriting all of his immorality. Yeah,
right.
It's absurd.
If that's true, then God's a piece of crap in there because aren't we in His image? It's like, well, I guess that makes God really stupid piece of crap. But the thing to me, it's absurd to say that, like, I have a conscience. I don't need some idea in my head about something outside of me, some God or whatever, or a heavenly reward to make me do the right thing. It's like, I know that this is the only life I have, and it's better to do the right thing now so that everybody, be good to other people, all that, so that everyone can have a good time in the only, time that they have to experience awareness. This is it.
Absolutely.
And once you're dead, it's gone. So why wouldn't you do the right thing and be nice to people? And
I don't know.
That's the way I see it, and I just find it perplexes me that religious people think that they're so right and they're so good, and yet without their God, they're saying that they would go out and rape people, basically.
Yeah.
And I find that completely hypocritical.
Yeah, the link that they just put up to the Euthyphro project is something that one of our current co-hosts and former hosts, Russell Glasser and Jeff D, have putting together. And it looks through a dialogue recorded by Plato about Socrates asking about this very question of morals. So he was discussing piety and asking, is something moral or pious because God commands it, or is it moral or pious and God just relays that information to us? If something is only moral because of God commands it, then it's arbitrary and it's subject to change at any time. And God can come out tomorrow and say, you know what, I was wrong about that murder thing. Go out and do some murder. I got a new law, murder's only wrong if you kill more than 10.
Well, yeah.
And that's just absurd. But the thing is that if something's right or wrong despite God, if he's not the author of morality and he's just the one relaying the message to us, then that implies that we could find out what's right or wrong without the need of any God, and that right or wrong exists without a God even in the picture. So there's no solution to the dilemma that supports what a lot of religionists claim, that atheists don't have any kind of any moral basis. Maybe you should take a little sociology, anthropology course and take a look at how the family unit begins. And if you want your children to live, you set up rules for them. And if you want to exist and find out that you're better off and more likely to exist in a group, that group's going to require rules. It's not that difficult of a concept, really. And I'm with you. I'm baffled at how they do it.
Yeah.
Well, I think Tracie wanted to say something before we get on to the other.
Oh, I don't know if I did or not.
Did you? Okay.
I don't think so.
All right, go on. You wanted to get to another point.
Well, the other point I had was 12-step programs, and I can't name them or whatever, but I've been to their meetings and stuff. And one of the basic things up there is that you have to believe in some sort of God, and they say, it's of your own understanding or whatever. The way it's worded is actually how we understand it,
right.
Which to me, they're talking about a Christian God. But when you say you're an atheist and you can't believe, it's sort of what the woman said, that they don't understand that I can't make that choice, that there's nothing in me that's going to go, oh, wait a second, oh, now I believe in God. It's like, my common sense tells me it's just not possible,
right.
And it's the same thing as a friend of mine once said, you can't, he said, it's like the question of whether there's a God or not. No one can answer that. It's like, hey, I can come up with an idea in my head about how the universe was created, but it doesn't mean everybody has to believe it just because I thought it up. God's a human idea. And it just seems kind of weird to me that people say, well, you can't say whether there's a God or not. It's like, well, yeah, I can, because another human made the idea up.
Yeah, I may not be able to say absolute certainty that I know there is no God, or but you can't say that you know there is. What we're talking about is belief. And is there a good reason to believe that a God exists? And the answer is obviously no.
Well, there's no proof. I mean, that's the thing. And they'll always say that to me, well, you don't have any proof God doesn't exist. Well, why would there be proof he didn't exist? The burden of proof, I think, is in religious people's court, that they need to prove that there's a God. I don't need to prove that something doesn't exist. That's crazy.
Well, Chris, next time somebody asks you to prove God doesn't exist, ask them how they intend to prove to you that Santa Claus does not exist.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, that's usually what I say is, I read The Hobbit when I was a kid, and I don't believe in Middle Earth. I mean, it's the same thing, you know. You can read the Bible all you want. It doesn't prove anything, you know, or the Quran or whatever religion you believe in, you know. But I just want to say that, you know, I've called you guys before when there were other hosts and stuff, and, you know, I'm glad, actually, that you guys have the show, because when you see things like that Regeneration TV thing, I mean, there's no voice they wouldn't even pick the phone up to let an atheist say his part of the thing.
Well, in fairness, the former host of this show, Ashley Perrion, was actually a guest on Regeneration TV. I don't know how long ago, and I wasn't a part of the group, so I haven't actually seen the show. I think the comments that you claimed that they made yesterday, I think it was.
Well, actually, I saw it last week, but I think the show was a few months old.
Okay, it could be. The comments that they made, I definitely would have objections to, and there are ways to talk back to them. They have, I think, a forum on their webpage as well. But, yeah, their comments are baseless. It's nonsense, and it's something worth fighting. But I don't want to completely tear them down as irreasonable, because they have had an atheist on the show. I don't know how it went, actually, and I'm not convinced that it went particularly well. But you know, without them here to defend themselves. But I will look into checking out the show and the rebroadcast and seeing what's on there, because that's one of the things that we try and do in the promotion of positive atheism, is to make sure that these misconceptions that have been spread now on TV as well, but, you know, traditionally from the pulpit about, you know, atheists have no moral compass, no basis for morals, and, you know, they're wanting to turn American society into some secular monster that will destroy all family values. Boy, isn't that a code word? Family values. Like, atheists don't have families, don't raise kids, don't love their families. I mean, it's just absurd.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to rag their show out completely, but it just seemed, you know, and I know when I called in, the guy who answered the phone told me that, you know, people from your show have been on their show.
Yeah.
But it was just such a one-way conversation. I mean, you guys will answer the phone and talk to religious people and explain why you think what you think, but it just seemed to me that they are completely closed to the idea that, you know what, atheists aren't a bunch of murdering, you know, immoral, you know, really bad people. And it's just, you know, that it seems like hate almost what they're spreading on there. And so it's good that there is a show like yours, which can at least, you know, give somebody some idea, you know, that atheists aren't these evil people that want to kill everyone and everything. They do. I mean, my parents are atheists. My dad's 80 years old. And, you know, there's not, we, you know, family values right there. You know, he raised a family. Him and my mother both had to work to raise a family, and we're not evil. We don't want to kill people. We don't believe in rape.
This is a good point. This is a good time to mention, especially with you on the call, because we've had some really good callers giving us good information. If you want to see a demonstration of exactly how evil we are, we do go to dinner after the show, where I will be eating meat from an animal, almost guaranteed. We're going to Threadgills. The show's over at 6 o'clock. We normally get down there between 6:30 6:45, down on Riverside. You're invited. Any atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us, meet the cast, crew, other ACA members. Good food, good time, and, you know, if you're coming down to preach, save it. The phone number will be up again in a minute or so, and you can call back in.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, thanks a lot. Appreciate the call. A lot of good calls today with points. Points worth addressing. You know, he was mentioning the one-sidedness of the show and how, you know, I'm sure there are people who think that this show is one-sided as well. I mean, part of it is your perspective. But maybe, just maybe, you have to be a little bit more protective when your beliefs can't be subjected to questioning.
And yeah, I think defensiveness and fear are a big part of it.
Yeah. So we'll go on to Steve. How you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Good.
Well, first of all, you guys address everybody's question that I've ever seen called, no matter what it was. Even the crank callers, until they finally do their swear words, you guys always address their questions. So I think that stands out in call-in shows.
Thanks a lot. I try. We've had a lot of discussions about crank calls and everything else. And, one of the things that I noticed in the last couple of weeks is that some of the crank callers have actually asked legitimate questions which are worth addressing before they then go off on their spiel.
Yeah.
And as long as we're able to answer those questions and talk about valid topics, that's fine.
I think they're evolving. They're trying to evolve so that they can get their swear words on the air. And in doing so, they're actually forming themselves, actual opinions. So maybe it's actually doing something for them.
Survival of the fittest question.
Well, I wanted to talk about something that Tracie was saying, that and it's about the role of emotions in intelligence. Because there's sort of this idea of your rational mind, and then where you do all your kind of logical arguing, and then there's your emotional impulses that are just sort of wacko things that basically... and I'm not saying Tracie was saying this, but
Thank you.
It's sort of a dichotomy that sort of, comes out sometimes. And I think a lot more of what we call intelligence comes from our emotions. I think our emotions are a part of the evolutionary process that is evaluating the world around us and reacting to it and trying to actually do a good reaction.
Sure.
And if it wasn't good, it's sort of a evolutionary level anyway, we wouldn't be here. And a lot of the friendship we have with dogs and cats and, our relationships with animals, I think is us actually recognizing ourselves in those animals. And I think at the level of emotions is really where we share the intelligence with the rest of the animal kingdom. The higher level intelligence is what's kind of unique. And when you get into arguments, of course, arguments are based on logic and things, but I think that we shouldn't dismiss how much of our emotions are actually affecting even our logical arguments. The sort of judgment of what's a good and a bad thing, it's more than just an analysis. It's sort of you feel it's good or bad, and even when it's a clean argument. There was a book by a guy, he's a neuroscientist of some sort, named something, Antonio Damasio, and he studies the brain. And there was it was called Descartes' error. It was from the 90s. Some worker got a spike in his brain that basically brain damaged him, but it didn't affect any of his intellect. All it did is it kind of wiped out a part of his limbic system or something. And even though he could still talk, he could still think, he could answer questions and do things, he became incapacitated because he could not make a decision. He absolutely could not bring himself to say that something was good or bad because he just couldn't bring anything to it at all. And he lost something that was driving his ability to, think about things, really. Anyway, I'm blathering on.
I haven't actually seen the study you're talking about. I know there's a lot of really interesting stuff with brains and brain damages, where people have suffered brain damage and they go through a complete personality change, which to me completely defies the concept of a soul as the essence of a person, and more accurately pins down the brain as determining who we are and what we are, how we think, feel. I mean, I don't necessarily think, a lot of people, when they talk about the soul, they talk about it as the essence of the human, and that the brain is just something that the soul uses. But it seems kind of obvious.
Sometimes I feel like when the discussion gets back and forth about reasoning and logic versus kind of unreasonable beliefs, I feel like the atheists are, Mr. Spock or something, and we just sit there and analyze things and basically with no emotions and come to the correct answer. And that is not the way it is. I mean, it's the same normal processes, and it does involve emotion. And I guess that's my point.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason for that, though. I had something like this come up in another discussion where, well, maybe you've overanalyzed it, maybe you've outsmarted yourself or thought too much about it. And it's a really tough thing, especially in this format where I'm on every week and handling calls. And you have co-hosts who are also handling callers. And you never know what question you're going to be asked. So obviously, I can't possibly be an expert on everything or even know how to refer somebody to the correct place to look. But I try and study as much as I can about the facts and think about things as strictly. Yes, there are plenty of times in my life where I just make gut decisions and go with it. I don't do that with major things anymore,
Right.
and I think that's the issue is when you're determining whether or not you believe in a God or how you should live your life and these broad concepts, I don't find gut reactions are really the best way to go about it.
Well, I think it's a matter of you make a gut reaction or you get an intuitive idea, and then you say, now wait a minute,
Yeah.
what's with this?
Let's validate my
But
gut.
without both things going on, you're not that bright. I mean, you really do need, both.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you guys do a great job. Thanks for letting me call.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye.
Appreciate the call. Do you have more?
Yeah, I had some notes on that. There was a writer, and I'm probably going to hack this quote to death, but the gist of it was that if a cat sits on a hot plate on an oven that happens to be turned on, that cat won't ever sit on that oven again. Whereas a human being touching a hot plate understands that in the future that hot plate might not be hot. So you're right that the evolution of emotion, it's there for a reason and it's helpful and we do learn from it. If it wasn't for the painful, upset reaction of, I just burned my hand, I might not be so careful with the hot plate in the future. The problem arises when somebody thinks like the cat, where they say, I burned my hand on that hot plate and therefore hot plates are always bad and we should never touch hot plates because they're evil. That's when you run into a problem. You have to be reasonable enough to understand that sometimes the hot plate is not hot and sometimes it is. So you have to just be careful before you touch it, make sure it's not hot. Yeah. And also, you're right about the idea that emotions can be helpful in decision making. And I think that a lot of times one of the things that I see that's confusing is that if you express to someone that they shouldn't be led by their emotions, they will sometimes take that and run with it and say, oh, so you think emotions are bad, or you think no one should pay any attention to their emotions, or people shouldn't have emotions, and it's like, no, I just think that reason should be the number one thing that helps you to decide, and then your emotional reaction to something should definitely come into play. And there may be times when you simply can't override it, when all the reason in the world is not going to allow you to do something that emotionally you just feel like, I can't do this, even though reasonably I think this is the thing to do. And there's really not much you can do about that if you just have this emotional aversion to a thing. You can work on it eventually, but in the moment you're not going to be able to override that sometimes, and I do understand that. And I think the best time to go with your gut reaction over your reason is when you must make a decision and you're lacking information. So if I have no information to go on and I have to do something, I'm probably going to go with whatever I feel is the right thing to do. So I just want to make it clear that, I agree with the caller that, yeah, emotions are an important thing to consider, but not necessarily the number one thing a person should use to decide major decisions in their life.
Yeah, I think one of the things is probably using critical analysis and analyzing things logically helps train your brain so that your gut reactions in the future are much better. They're much more reliable.
Experience.
Yeah. Let's go into Joe Bob.
Hi guys. How you going?
Pretty good.
Great. Okay. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to have these discussions with the public. It'd be great if everybody in our society would respect the beliefs of others and stop wanting to try to convince us to believe in the way they believe. So, but that's not the way the world is. So we have to deal with it.
Oh, we appreciate you watching and calling in.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious, how much have the reactions of the public changed since you guys started the show however many years ago it was?
I'm actually a bad person to ask, and this is
Everybody on the panel.
No, I'm not saying this to be mean because this is particularly amusing. This was probably the worst possible day for you to ask that particular question. The show's been around for I think almost 8 years or just over 8 years, and there have been a number of different hosts who I've seen some of their work, but I've only been a part of the group. I've only actually been hosting for a month or so, and part of the group for about a year. And this is the first time on the program for both Tracie and Ann. So, I think we're seeing some better calls in the year that I've been here. We're seeing some better calls. You know, cranks of course go through stages, but I don't think we've had anything nasty lately. I don't think there's been any. You know, you guys are immoral monsters, and you're trying to teach my kids that nasty evolution and all that garbage. But over the whole 8 years, I really can't say. Maybe we should have a show where we get some of the former hosts on to have a look back, talk at stuff.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, keep on doing what you're doing. You guys do a great job. I'm very glad that you guys are so respectful to the people who call in. You remain calm. You do a great job. So.
Well, it'd look crazy if I was.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the call, and keep watching and spread the word. We've got, speaking of ACA people who've been around a while and back, we've got Joe Zamecki. How you doing?
Howdy, I'm doing great.
What you got for us?
Well, like your last caller said, I have always thought of the same thing, to have former hosts and co-hosts on the show, people who have been on the show years ago, to be a guest on now. And I can answer that question that the caller had.
Well, please do.
How things have changed for the callers and the viewers of the show and for y'all and everything. By the way, I'm Joe Zamecki. I was the co-host of the show, the first co-host in 1996, almost 10 years ago. And wow. I can tell you the first call that we took was a crank call. And it was a guy coming on saying, I believe in miracles. And that guy called again and again and again, and it was fun. But I can tell you, though, from watching the show now, that y'all have better callers, for the most part, more intelligent questions and comments from the callers, and a lot of desensitizing has taken place. I mean, in a small way, I guess the viewers of the show, and not necessarily the city in general, but definitely when people call into the show nowadays, it's with a more valid and mature approach than a lot of callers back then. I just think you have a much better time with things back then. Plus, I have to tell you, we had a whole lot of lighting and other technical problems in the show, and the show now looks a whole lot more professional. And I'll be the first to admit, because I was one of the guys up there on the ladder with the lights every Sunday morning with that. So
we're going to keep working on those things. You had something else you want to address, Joe?
Yeah, real quick, the morality or supposed morality of a God that would allow all of this fighting and rioting and killing over a cartoon. And every time I look at that cartoon, it's, Mohammed with a turban that's made out of a bomb that's lit. That's prophetic. I mean, they are answering the cartoon with the exact same kind of sentiment.
Yeah, it's ironic.
For real. Yes.
Yeah, you start throwing around a word like prophetic, and all of a sudden we're giving them credit for stuff, too.
Well, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
They want it to come true, because if this is a commentary, the cartoon was supposed to be a commentary on Islam, or at least Mohammedism, and he was a violent person, too, a warlord. But nowadays, they have the choice as to whether they want to be violent or not, and they're not being forced into this. This was a chosen reaction with violence that they want, and it just shows that if this God is there, don't look to him for morality. It's the bomb. The cartoon is absolutely correct.
There's a lot of really, I was going to say questionable things, but actually I don't think they're questionable at all. There are some outright immoral, nasty precepts in both Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. You don't have to dig too deep to find, in some cases, direct orders to kill other people, but, even ignoring just that violence, the Bible, for example, not to switch from Islam back to Christianity, but it endorses slavery, and nowhere does it say slavery is wrong. It specifically tells you how much to pay for your slaves and who you can enslave and how to mark them by putting their ear up against the door and driving a stake through it. The fact that most Jews and Christians don't approve of slavery anymore isn't a representation of the rational reasonableness of their religion. What it is an indication of how much society, reasonable society, has been able to impact their beliefs, forcing them to abandon things which are actually parts of their religion in order to get along with the rest of the world.
Right, and in that way, religion evolves.
Exactly.
Right in front of our eyes. Anyway, thanks a lot. I'll go and watch some more. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And as another reminder, anybody who wants to join us for dinner after the show, we'll be going to Threadgills. We normally get there between 6:30 and 6:45 or so. It's 301 West Riverside. You're welcome to come down and meet the cast and crew, other ACA members, etc. But did you have anything to add to what Joe was saying?
And I mean, I agree with the statement on the evolution of religion, and I think I would just maybe mention that religion does evolve, and a lot of times Christians believe that religion is unchanging, or that the brand of Christianity that they're currently worshiping or practicing has been that way for all time, or is getting back to the roots of Christianity, when in reality the ideas, especially prior to the production of the Bible, in Christianity for hundreds of years before the Bible was produced, were very different than what Christianity is today.
Yeah. And you know, Islam being founded around 700 CE or so, you've got a religion which supposedly is now you would think be more progressive. You know, so here it is 700 years after another religion of which it considers Jesus to be a prophet. I mean, everything about Judaism and Christianity is not tossed off as you know, heresy by Islamic people. Jesus was a prophet just like Mohammed was a prophet, and so was Adam and Noah and Moses and David, etc. They just think that they got the last copy of the book. You know, God gave his last word, he gave it to Muhammad, and that's golden.
Yeah.
But let's go on to Greg. How you doing?
Yes. Yeah.
How you doing?
Oh, yeah, to the fat fuck in the red.
Thanks, Greg.
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about how the calls have changed and everything else, but hey, back to, I guess, talking about Islam and Muslims. In addition, there's been a lot of discussion about the cartoons and whether or not, you know, reactions and overreactions and how much free speech should be allowed. You know, I'm pretty much of the opinion that I think it's distasteful to intentionally offend somebody just for the sake of offending them. If you're just going to be rude to somebody, call them a name, you know, misrepresent their character just for the sake of doing that, then that is definitely something that I would be opposed to. I still support your right to do that. You can be an ass if you want to. But if you're making a valid social comment about your perception of a religion or a religious group, and it has foundations in truth, yeah, we realize not all Muslims are violent or practice those things, but you know, and a generalization like that can possibly be misconstrued to, you know, portray some people in the wrong light.
But what's ironic, though, is that if the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it.
Right.
Like if somebody does practice Islam and they are nonviolent, they are not portrayed in that cartoon. Whereas the people who would be portrayed in the cartoon as violent are ironically the ones that would riot because of this. That's what I find really strange about it.
Yeah. It's, you know, to me, it's valid social commentary. The foundations of the cartoons are valid. You know, if it's like saying, you know, Judaism supports slavery. Hey, it does. I'm sorry that, you know, there are no practicing Jews who still adhere to that, you know, concept. The fact remains, it's there. And when you have a specific rule, and even if you have a later rule which is a general, the specific kind of has to stay until it's specifically, you know, ruled out. I mean, these people Christians specifically, who want to chuck out the whole Old Testament, well, first of all, they're denying what the New Testament says about how you can't have the new without the old, and that's not just a book concern. It's Jesus, the words attributed to him are, you know, if you don't believe Moses, how could you believe me? plus this buildup of New Testament fulfilling Old Testament prophecies, etc. They, as much as they'd like to check out all of those Old Testament things as, antiquated, you can't really do that.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Jesus say that he wanted to fulfill the law and not destroy it?
Yeah. Not a jot or tittle will pass away. But, I don't know, it's kind of hard to... well, I'm not quite sure. Do you have something else you want to go through?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had my chart, but I emailed that, and you can't really show it. It's like too small.
Well, we can talk about the chart.
We can talk about the chart. You got a chart.
It's too small to read. But
it is too small to read. But it was just a chart that was done to show the inconsistencies in the Gospels between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I think the best I could do would be to encourage anybody to read those Gospels side by side. I don't want to do the blow by blow here without being able to visually show this. But I think that Luke has some interesting ideas that are a little bit different than what Matthew and Mark had. And John, I would say, has a completely different story altogether. So if you ever have time and you want to do it, it's a good exercise to just look up the resurrection chapters in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and sort of read those parallel to one another and just kind of see what you make of it. If it seems to make sense to you, that's fine. If you think it seems a little bit strange and out of whack and sort of not aligning, I would agree with you, and I would just encourage you to do that as an exercise at home. If you have a Bible, take it out and check it out.
Yeah, there's I was raised in, I don't think anybody ever examined critically what was in the Bible, at least not, among family and whatever else. It was just generally accepted. So there's this notion of when you're told that the Bible is the perfect Word of God without error and there's no contradictions, and those who say that there are contradictions are simply finding contradictions that don't really exist. That ends up seeping out into the general thoughts of the population, and they never consider it. And most people, most believers even, don't really know what's in the book. They haven't bothered to study it. It's more of a feel-good, I need Jesus in my heart and I want to go to heaven, and let's not consider anything critically. When there are real contradictions in the Bible, and there are also more generalized concepts which can contradict with each other, and some that contradict with science. Saying rabbits chew the cud, for example, is kind of something in the Bible that, you'd think an omnipotent God, if he was relaying information to somebody to write down, probably wouldn't have made a big mistake like that. Or bats as birds, and some of those. I tend to find those not really important. Yes, it's significant that there are contradictions there, which we can't, readily resolve. But most Christians will just say, well, it's the importance of the message. The core of the message is there. But now you've moved from a position of this is the perfect Word of God to this is the pretty good Word of God. And as long as you get the core of it down. But did you have?
Yeah, I will just I'll give like one quick example if I can. This is the women or the group, depending on which one you're reading, the group of people that makes the first visit to the tomb. They go in, they in different ways see an angel or see two angels or see nothing, go in and then talk to men. When they leave the tomb, initially after seeing the angel, Matthew says, and they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to report to his disciples. And this is after the angel has told them, Jesus has been resurrected. Mark says they went out and fled the tomb for trembling and astonishment and had gripped them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And then you have Luke, who says that they went out and reported this, and then we've got John, who's way out in left field, who says that, he only mentions Mary, but I mean, obviously the Christian response would be there could have been others there, and they're only mentioning Mary. So he mentions only Mary and says that she ran and came to Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So it's obvious that upon the first visit to the tomb in John, there's no angel at all. She goes in there, and it says, she saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. And let's see, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark. She saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. She ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciples whom Jesus loved and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've laid him." So her first report to the other disciples is the body has been stolen or taken or moved or something. We don't know what. Whereas all the other three, on the initial visit to the tomb, she sees at least something that explains to her that Jesus has risen. And it's just completely gone in John. And the event actually does occur, but not until long after several other events that occur completely out of sequence with John. And that's just kind of, to me, one of the many weird things that happens in this story that just doesn't jive.
Yeah, there's also something interesting in the last verse that you were talking about where she goes to see Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved.
Right.
There's a lot of discussion about that particular phrasing because, he supposedly loves everybody, and he obviously loves Peter, but Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved, far be it from me to rile up believers, but there was suggestion even quite some time ago that Jesus may have been a homosexual, and this was
a special relationship.
A special relationship. I'm not saying that's actually true because, I don't have any reason necessarily to think that Jesus ever existed historically. This is mostly just folk tales and let's build up a mythical character, etc. There is some question as to whether or not Jesus actually existed historically. I think it's possible that somebody with that name existed. Whether or not the stories, once you get into the Gospels of the deeds and how accurate they are and how well they represent the life of this individual, I think that's hugely in question. And I don't necessarily think that there's a great grounds for the homosexual claim. It could have been some kind of platonic love, or this could have been Jesus's favorite. I don't know.
Best friends.
Yeah, it's my buddy. We're all Jesus's favorite. Let's go on to Reuben. How you doing?
Hello. How are you doing, guys?
Good.
My question concerns suicide, and atheists feel that we only temporarily exist. Correct, so to speak.
Atheism, in its strictest sense, just means you don't have a belief in God. What you think about what happens after you die is a separate issue. Like, for example, Buddhists are atheists because they don't have a God, but they do believe in reincarnation. So there's not a unified concept. Now, personally, being a rationalist, I don't believe that there's any such thing as soul or evidence for soul or evidence of anything beyond life. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is my one shot at life, and it's the only one I'm going to get.
Okay. And do you feel, when you hear of someone committing suicide, how do you feel? Do you feel bad, or do you just don't care? Because we temporarily exist, and once we're gone, we're gone. So it's kind of like, who cares?
Can I ask you, Reuben, if you thought that this was it, that this was the only chance at life anybody ever got, and then you saw that person throw it away, the one and only chance at life, how would you think you would feel about that?
Well, if I personally knew the person, I would feel bad. But if I didn't know the person, I wouldn't feel anything at all because, it has nothing to do with me.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
The thing is, if somebody said, some guy in Oregon who I've never met and don't know anything about killed himself, it doesn't evoke strong emotion for me because I don't have any kind of connection with him. However, I can still look at that and say that, that's
I'm
disappointing.
Not personal feelings. I'm just saying, would you just feel bad? Just hearing about. Not necessarily like, you're going to cry your heart out, but just kind of look down upon it or something.
I look at it as a waste, a disappointment.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate event.
I see. Okay, well that was my question there. Just wanted to know how y'all
Thank
feel
you.
about suicide.
That's a good question. Thanks, Reuben. And the information on line 2 is wrong. It's the old one from before. So we'll try 1. Is it Ed?
Hello?
Is this Ed?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Pretty good. I was calling, you were on the subject of the evolution of Christianity earlier, and I think that's totally true. I think it's true with all religions. But, if you go back, Christianity and Judaism, and then they were actually polytheists, even in the very beginning.
Right.
So,
Correct.
I just think that maybe Islam is also evolving, maybe just at a different rate or a different pace, and it really clashes.
One of my defenses of, of course, I'm going to defend free speech. I feel very strongly about free speech, and I think the cartoons were free speech. But I also, in talking with other people, feel that we recognize that religions evolve. Right. And criticism of this nature, providing the opportunity, kind of a wake-up call to Muslims who may not be violent or may not follow these particular precepts, to clean up their own yard, so to speak. It's not going to happen unless somebody says something. Right. People are willing to go along their merry way. So this may prompt more evolution out of this particular religion.
Right. I think it is. I think that's what we're seeing, is the evolution, of Islam. And I've watched the evolution of Christianity. It's gone through so many things. I mentioned earlier they are derivative of a polytheist religion. And, Satan used to be a much bigger part in Christianity than it is now. If you've noticed now, very rarely do people, evoke images of Satan, whereas in early Christianity, especially in the Catholic Church, he was real. And it was like, that was, and if that's true, then wasn't that another God? And then we also mentioned the angels earlier. What are those if they're not gods? Then what are they? And
once you start talking about supernatural creatures who are on a lower scale, if there were no God and there was just an angel, and that's all that ever existed, and an angel showed up here, he'd be pretty much a god according to anybody's standards. So
right. But anyway, so I was just mentioning that because of their polytheistic roots. Yeah. That you can see the evolution over the years, and then how of course, Western civilization and the Greeks and all influenced it throughout the years. But I just think that now in America there's a completely different Christianity than it was in the very beginning. And that's all I had to say.
Yeah. When he talks about the polytheism of Judaism prior to, I guess, it actually becoming Judaism, Middle Eastern polytheism, I remember reading that Jehovah actually was templed with a wife. So they have temples of Jehovah where Ashtoreth, his wife, was also worshipped alongside him. And also Baal was a relative of Jehovah, according to the pantheon. I don't know, sometimes I think he was an uncle and sometimes a son. It was one of those tribal sort of uncle, son, brother relationships. But definitely polytheism. I think a lot of people don't know that before Jehovah became the one God, he was married and he was related to Baal, whom he later was in conflict with in the Old Testament.
Right. Yeah. I'd be interested in knowing what, fundamental Christians here, how they would describe those beings. I mean, if they're not gods and they were married to Jehovah,
Well, all the stuff that we know about the formation, the foundations of Judaism, for example, come from outside the Bible. The only thing that you have in the Bible that is hints and allusions to it, for example, the word Elohim is plural. Right. And what you'll see is when they're actually talking about Jehovah or Yahweh, it'll be Yahweh Elohim or Jehovah Elohim. And that in Kirk Bibles is translated as Lord God or God Almighty. If you look into the Babylonian gods and other polytheistic religions that surrounded that era, you'll see that what it's really saying is like Jehovah of the Elohim. This God of the pantheon of gods is our God, which is the only reason that you would need to have the first commandment anyway. The first commandment, which says, I am Jehovah, I'm your God, and you won't have any other gods before me. It says right in there that there are other gods, and you're not supposed to have them. So,
We are doing a great job, and by the way, I've been watching since probably all 8 years.
Well, then you can answer the question of how the show's changed.
Well, I think, was it Jeff that called earlier? Zamecki?
Joe Zamecki.
I think he's right on. The questions have gotten better, and there don't seem to be quite as many prank callers.
Good.
We do what we can, and we appreciate you watching for all those years. You've been around longer than I have, and hopefully I'll live up to the standards of the other hosts that have been on the show. Thanks a lot for calling, Ed.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good day. Yeah, the polytheistic origins and the Babylonian gods and all that stuff within Judaism is...
Just to toss out there, I remember when I went to church, they used to talk about the mystery of the earlier verses, like in the creation story, about let us make man in our image. And that makes a lot more sense when you understand that the term for God in those passages is Elohim, which is plural. So you have gods discussing how they're going to produce man.
You know what the only answer to this is that from a church apologist that I found?
I've heard them say that it was the other entities such as angels.
No. I mean, I'm not saying that, but I'm talking about the actual language part of it, is that Elohim is plural, but there are occasions in the Bible where it's used with a singular verb. And so they're saying that it's both plural and singular, and sometimes it's used with a plural verb and sometimes it's used with a singular, but it really only means singular.
Right.
And I'm like...
Well, another interesting thing is that I believe it's in Solomon. I'd have to see if it's a psalm or in Solomon, but I think it's in Solomon that the goddess Wisdom actually pops off, and she talks for quite a long time. And one of the things she discusses is how she was there and present at the creation and the foundation of the world. So, I mean, even you have a sub-deity that was Sophia, who was translated wisdom in Solomon, who talks about her being there when Jehovah produced the world. So, I mean, that's a goddess right there speaking in the Old Testament for herself. I was always told that, this is just a personification of wisdom. And it's like, well, in fact, it was. It was a deity personification. And when you said Sophia and, wisdom in the Old Testament, they understood that you were talking about a sub-deity.
All right. Let's go on to, is it JR?
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Now I've been watching.
You might want to turn your TV down. We're getting a little feedback.
Okay, I've been watching the show, and I've came across people talking about human existence, and I've heard that first of all that the guy said that we all exist due to some fact. I mean, how do you explain human existence?
Are you talking about the origins of humanity or the origins of everything?
Yes. What gives you breath and life?
Oh, you're asking me. I'd be the first one to say that anybody that tells me that they know for a fact where life spawned from should be publishing on it. If they know with certainty. If there is any sort of scientific certainty about where, how life came to be and how we all came to be and where life came from, that's up to somebody that knows more about science than me to answer, because I'm not aware of it. But I also don't believe that means that I can plug anything into that to say that because I don't know what the answer is, therefore if I say God is the answer to that, it means it must be right.
Well, wouldn't you like to know?
Well, sure.
Sure, and that's a question that science is continuing to work on. But just because we don't necessarily have the full and complete, unequivocal, correct answer to the origin of life, doesn't mean, as Tracie pointed out, that we can just go subbing in God and say, "Whoops, we got the answer."
Yeah.
Well, how do you interpret the Bible and say, well, the Bible says one thing, but it means another?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, first of all, I think that the Bible is being misinterpreted. There can only be so many descriptions and definitions of words and articles in the Bible.
On what level do you think it's been misinterpreted?
We're coming down to almost running out of time, so you're going to need to get to the point quick.
It's being equated with too many substances and man's beliefs and other theories.
I really don't understand. I tell you what, save this up, call us back again next week, or you can email, and anybody else who didn't happen to get through, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. Figure out exactly what points you want to make and try and get it narrowed down to something we can talk about.
Give some examples.
In a reasonable time, have an example or something. A lot of times we're accused of taking something out of context or, using some odd translation of the Bible or something. And I as somebody who was a former fundamentalist Christian and studying for seminary to be a preacher, I do my best to make sure that I don't take things out of context.
Well, it seems like you'd rather for this existence to remain a mystery to you rather than to find the truth.
No, and I'm sorry, we're almost out of time. I got to let you go. I'd love to have the answer to the mystery. I hopefully we're working on it and we'll find it. I'd like to thank Tracie and Ann for coming down here today.
Come out to Threadgills.
Come out and join us for dinner at Threadgills, and we'll see you next week.